Hey Hawk,
Hi, Jane. How are you?
welcome. Pretty good. How about you?
Doing all right. Got my coffee, got my water. We're set.
Nice. What is your job title these days? How do you
Oh my
describe your
God.
profession?
That is such a good question. And I wish I had an easy answer. Um, yeah, I'm in sort of constant. So I call myself a magic astrologer. That has been my like Twitter bio for a long time. Um, I just changed my bio on Instagram to include the word coach, which was a very contentious decision for me internally.
Why was that?
Because I guess I have like some associations with coaching that make it feel, I don't know, it's very easy for me to be like, well, I'm doing magic or and astrology. So that makes this like a very like legitimate spiritual enterprise. Whereas like coaching is like very overtly like we are now doing like we're now fully into the like transformational industry. You know what I mean? As opposed to
Yeah.
being like, oh, I'm just some kind of like monk on a hill somewhere and you can like come find me and we'll like look at your stars together. It's like, no, I'm actually like here to like coach you through like transformational process. Like
Mm,
that's like I have stereotypes about like what kind of person does that. You know what I mean?
right, right. Yeah.
But that
Okay,
is what I
well,
do. Like in my work as a
yeah.
magic astrologer, that's literally what I'm doing. And magic and astrology are two tools for that aim. So I think I found myself describing my tools as a way to kind of like not have to confront the susness of the transformational industry. Yeah. Anyway, but that's what I'm doing. And I liked doing it. So we're just gonna go ahead and like label ourselves with it for a second and see how it feels.
Awesome. Well, could you give us a little bit of an introduction about yourself and what your path has been like to get to that point where you're a magic astrologer and coach?
Magical mindset coach. That's what I've got on my Insta bio. Yeah, so I am an occultist, and have been for like 10 years. And what that means is that I like work, my main focus is spirituality inside this like silo of so-called Western occultism. Um, yeah, so like ceremonial magic is a big part of my practice, but I also am influenced by like Soto Zen and a lot of other stuff. So um yeah. So I did that for a really long time and then I started getting into astrology because as a magician, like it comes up a lot. People love doing magic with the stars and planets. And I realized that like nobody inside Western occultism is like that good at astrology. It's very like modern astrology influenced. So I don't know. I started getting really into it, and then I bumped into Adam Ellenboss, who is a traditional astrologer and a pretty prolific teacher, um, who happened to live like down the street from me at that point. And I went to a class with him, like a 4 hour class, and it was just like I had never seen astrology do the things that he could do with them. Like I got a consultation with him, I think maybe first, and he like identified my mother's profession using the chart, which I is something I can do now, like pretty successfully some of the time. But then I had just never seen anybody successfully pull out material conditions that had to do with somebody who wasn't the chart's owner out of the
Mm.
chart. I was like, that's crazy. How did you do that? Like, you know, some shit that like the people on fucking cafe astrology do not know.
Why do you think that in general there weren't that many talented astrologers within Western occultism?
Oh, well, the lineage was like highly heavily broken by the
Mm.
Enlightenment. So I mean that's like I know oversimplification, but like they finally successfully broke that lineage of astrological transmission. Up until this point, there had been like up until like the 1800s, basically, 1700s, there had been this like pretty continuous transmission of a lot of this knowledge. And then just like something happened where it stopped being transmitted and a lot of the information was like lost. And some of this was gradual. And then in we recently started retranslating texts basically and like re-linked up with this chain that had been kind of like dropped, like the people involved in Project Hindsight. So like Demetra George is a famous still living member of Project Hindsight. And like I think like a lot of like astrologers learned from those folks in the 90s that there were actually all these like extant texts, and there had been people doing this for like thousands and thousands of years in a very like all the academics were kind of in their own silo studying like the history of like stellar omens, and then like the astrologers were in their own silo, their little like occultism silo, and those two people were not talking to each other at all. And then basically I think the internet happened and everyone was like, oh, you have all these books, oh, you have all this like practical interest, like what? And suddenly there was like a slow explosion that I think kind of like peaked with Chris Brennan's astrology podcast and the publication of his book Hellenistic Astrology. And obviously there was tons of other people involved in this revival, but he is definitely like a strong evangelist for the techniques.
So once you had that consultation where that astrologer pulled out that thing about your mom's profession, you had never seen this done with astrology before, where did you go from there in terms of your astrological education?
I did 2 years, 2.5 years of coursework with Adam Ellenboss, the same person. So I was like, he was really great, and he approached it from a really like spiritually grounded angle, which was another thing that was very like missing for me. People were sort of presenting astrology as just like tech, you know, and Adam is very like soulful and like interested in like how this can be used to like benefit a spiritual person on a spiritual journey, which is very aligned with my ethos now as a practicing astrologer.
Can you say a little more about that? What the kind of that soulfulness and what that spiritual grounding is like as a student of his, and now as, you know, in your own practice?
Yeah, well, I'll speak for myself. I think that, yeah, I mean, I feel like astrology is like a mirror of the stars, and it helps us see the ways in which we're like fundamentally connected to everything. Because there's some crazy implications, right? If such a thing can exist. Such a thing where like Mars's motion in the sky can like portend the events in the not the real world, but the rest of the world. That's very weird, right? And a lot of people just are like, well, this is a given that we have to take on board to use astrology. But I'm like, that's fucking weird. Like, let's stop there and have a think about that.
This is something that I love about listening to you talk. Like, I've heard you on various podcasts and things, and you're like, so this is kind of a weird thing about how reality works, isn't it? That you're not even like asking a tarot deck for an answer. It's just all being given to you all the time, all the answers.
It's already there, which implies some kind of very strange like interconnected like binding between all things that have consciousness, which obviously a lot of people have a lot of takes about that. Like all of the religions, for example, have takes about that, I guess. Yeah, so I think that's really fucking weird. And Adam, for one, approaches astrology on what I call the omen model. I don't know if that's like what people call it, but it's definitely what I call it. Where it's like this works because it's an omen. And an omen you don't have to pull out of a deck, right? So it's kind of like Adam described it to me back then in like 2017 or so as like tarot, basically. Where it's like the Tower card, right, is not causing the event that it portends. It's just portending it, right? So it's like Mars in your 7th didn't like make you have a breakup. It's just the sign that's signifying the breakup. But how can it do that before like the breakup? You know what I mean? So anyway, I have an essay about this on my Patreon that's up for free. If it's the first one that I've ever posted, if anybody wants to hear my take on why that works, I have very clearly explicated it there, so I will not repeat the entire thing.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll link to your Patreon. Yeah. Anything else that you want to say about your background before we go into detail about some of the consultations that you offer?
Yeah, I feel like just currently, like my current like offerings are all this sort of like the current amalgamation of all these separate threads that had been very disparate for me in the first like 10-15 years of my spirituality. And now like I've really integrated like the omens model, the like you are on a personal initiatory journey as like part 2 of that, and then like also the astrological technology that I've like gleaned from like all these wide variety of teachers and like ancient texts. I feel like, yeah, and then doing magic for like personal transformation as like part of that initiatory journey. I've like really, I feel like it's all like coming together into this central thing now. um yeah, so
That
those are like
sounds
my,
like an amazing kind of like milestone along the path to have that sort of like reaping what you've been sowing and everything's sort of starting to come together and show these clear delineations of offerings.
yeah, definitely it's been confused, and obviously it keeps blowing apart and coming back together, but like we're currently in a recondensing moment, I think, so that's nice.
Cool. How long ago was it that you first did that coursework with Adam?
2017 I did year 1. I think I like signed the document in November 2016,
Cool.
something like
Cool.
that.
About 6-7 years in. Nice.
Yeah, of traditional astrological practice for sure. And then I started doing like a practicum training. Like I put myself through a little practicum period where I did like by donation sliding scale readings starting in like summer 2018, and gradually
Cool.
worked up from like part-time to full-time now.
Nice. So let's talk about the offerings that you have. Maybe, well, let's start with a gods and guides session. Can you tell us a little bit about what that would entail and what it tends to look like?
Yeah, so this is a good like transition kind of from what I was just talking about, because it's like the gods and guides session I kind of envision as like literally like 2 people having a chance meeting in the forest, you know, like how a lot of myths work this way, where there's just like by happenstance like you 2 people just like bump into each other and they have like important information that like needs to be exchanged. And that's like some part divinely orchestrated and part by just like who knows the mechanism by which these things exist. um I have to get up because my cat has discovered a bag of chamomile. Excuse me.
Go for it.
No, that's not for you. I'm so sorry to say it, but it's just not. It's literally the last thing I want strewn about the floor. Yeah. So yeah, like chance meeting in the woods, like happenstance vibes. It feels like, yeah, very much like I'm just sitting there by my campsite and then you like come upon me on social media, like that's you like seeing the flicker from my campfire and you're like, oh, I don't know, I like feel like I should go over and talk to this person for some reason, right? And then like we talk, and by initiating the conversation we like kind of like, I see it as like an evocation of like the oracle, right? Where the idea is we're like kind of in communion with like my gods and my guides, your gods and your guides, and we're like, well, we're here for a reason, so like now it's our job to figure out why, like what are we supposed to talk about right now. And gradually over the course of those conversations there's usually like an unfolding. I'll let people like, I usually start by asking people, why are you here? Like why did you come up to me? Like why did you want to exchange currency to like have this conversation? And that like positions us kind of. Yeah.
Does it often
And I
have
like,
that sort of, oh, go ahead.
no, you go ahead.
Does it often kind of have that mysterious flavor when you ask them of like, I don't totally know, just saw you and was drawn to you?
No, actually, almost everybody has a very clear answer to this question, which is why I keep
Okay.
using it. Is it's like, I'm like, why are you here? And there's usually an initial like taken abackness, like, oh, I didn't expect to be asked that. Like, I thought there was like a clear reason why it would be obvious that I'm because you know, a lot of people have these offerings that are so like, you give me the money and then I give you this result. Like I will tell you. And a lot of people think my consults are kind of like, oh, I'm gonna like tell you like who, like what God wants to talk to you. And that actually does happen periodically. But I think it's easy to expect discrete results from a discrete monetary exchange. But that's not really exactly what my containers are about. But yeah, so I asked people and they sometimes seem a little bit surprised, but they're always like, oh, that's a good question. Like, and then something almost always comes out of it, like where they're just like, yeah, I guess. Like, I'm like, what leads you to talk to an astrologer right now? Like, why do you want to consult with somebody who you think has this like specialized set of knowledge, right? And they're like, yeah, I guess I'm just like feeling really weird about like this part of my life, or I'm feeling this like sort of like ephemeral call in this certain direction, and I just want to see more of that. And the great thing about astrology is um like it's like a scrying bowl, right? Because it's like ephemeral, like materiality and spirituality are so fucking ephemeral, that it's like you need a more solid medium to like cast this ephemerality onto. So someone's like, oh, I'm just having these like really sort of like feelings about this direction I'm supposed to go in. We can pull up the chart and like look at the moment as it is right now and use other divinatory tools like tarot and like the surrounding omens for the consultation and be like, oh, okay, like I have a hint about what that's about for you. Like whatever it is that came out of your mouth when you sat down with me, like that's what we're talking about now. And now we're going to look at the chart. We're going to look at like where you are. We're going to like look at the fucking amount of birds who like cross my path on my walk to get to my office to talk to you. You know what I mean? Like all of the omens for the present moment that are available to me. Like that's what we're looking at to just kind of like position you. Yeah.
Including omens that you were noticing in the hour leading up to the session, and maybe that they mentioned that they were noticing right before the session, that kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, cool.
That's actually one of my favorite things that started happening with clients. Like since I've like been like open to receiving those, like if I am like walking back from the coffee shop to get to the appointment and something like weird happens, like I'm writing it down. It's going in the notes for the session.
Cool. What are any examples come to mind? Things that have popped up right before sessions for you?
I really can't think of a single one. Unfortunately, nothing's coming into my brain.
You mentioned, so it's called Gods and Guides, the consult. Do those feel distinct to you?
I think a god is a specific subcategory of spiritual being, and then guides is sort of like vaguer, where it's like we're not totally clear on who this person is, or they could be like your ancestors, or just like somebody who is personally invested in you that is discorporate for some reason that like doesn't have a body.
Gotcha. Yeah, something that back when I did one of these with you, I want to say it was like 9 months ago, maybe last summer. And when I saw you tweet about it, you said something that to the effect of check in with your guides, see if they think you should do this, which was really cool. It kind of added to the like chance encounter in the forest vibe of it all, because when I came to you, you started talking about astrology and I was like, oh, I don't really actually know anything about astrology. And you were kind of like, why why are you interested in my work then? It's like, oh, I just think you're really cool. I was very drawn to the like deity work aspect of it, and I was trying to get into that and felt a little lost. So that was kind of my pull. And then when I saw that instruction, I sort of like did my version of checking in with my team, and it was like a very clear yes. So I thought that was a really nice way of describing it or getting the word out.
And you don't have to answer this, but what did you feel like we were there to talk about? You know what I mean? Like, did you get like some kind of like kernel of information that you felt like did the invocation work? You know what I mean? To be like, you are here for a reason. Like why did they tell you to do that, do you think?
Yeah, that's a good question. I feel like it helped me fold a deity practice into my existing spiritual practice and just make it a regular thing. Just develop a couple of techniques around it and then just fold it in, demystify it a little bit.
Nice.
And there's a way that I can like just hesitate a lot with these kind of things and feel like I want to do it right before I just jump in. And once we kind of like talked through it and you gave me a lot of ideas, it was like almost like some permission to just like fuck around and find out. And that helped a lot, just like get through some of those initial hangups that I had. And yeah, like I said, it kind of just became part of my practice. If I think back now to like what was really memorable, because it's been long enough ago that I don't remember everything about it.
Right.
There was like a breathing technique that you showed me that I still use all the time. I don't know if you would even remember that,
Was it the in
but
for four, hold for four? Nice. The fourfold
yeah.
breath.
Yeah, and it's just like I think you described it as like there's a way that you can kind of hold the fullness or hold the emptiness after the exhale that like
Yeah.
allows space for some of the like answers to come in that I'm asking questions about.
Wow.
Um, so yeah, sometimes it's just little things like that, that end up sticking and becoming like a yeah, just a heavily used tool in the toolbox.
That's so cool because that technique, while it being probably the simplest thing that I have on me, you know what I mean, is like probably is at the fucking kernel core of my spiritual practice. Like
Nice.
I don't do ceremonial magic like that anymore. Like not like the breathing technique, but like all that, like ceremonial magic. I used to do a ton of really complicated shit, and now it's like we'll do an invocation. Like I'll basically read some poetry that I wrote or someone else wrote, and then I'll just like sit and do that breathing and that like invitation for like meaning and connection and response to come.
Nice.
And it works so much fucking better I mean, it's not necessarily better. Ritual technology is amazing. It's a cool trick to like to get and it was really helpful for my especially ADHD brain to like have something complex to attend to while I was trying to be present with myself. But the more, yeah, I'm really having a cycle now, and my practice might get more complex again, but I'm currently having a cycle of just like stripped down, like we are just sitting vibes happening.
Gotcha. So you used to do more, I don't really know much about ceremonial magic. You used to do more like complex ceremonial rituals, and now it's just a more bare bones, simple practice.
Yeah, because I've like realized that the goal for me is like communion and like communication. So I was able to kind of eliminate things that weren't super to that end. Because when I was first trying to learn magic, I was like, well, I guess I'm just going to do exactly what it says on the tin because I don't really know what any of this shit does. So I don't want to start taking pieces out. You know what I mean? Um,
Yeah, I
yeah.
just had a realization recently that I was like, I don't know if I like rituals. Or it's just that I haven't come into a relationship with them in a way that feels actually fun for me. It's like I think I tend to like over seriousness, and so I'm always trying to remember playfulness, and
Mhm.
rituals for me can just feel over serious or like stilted or something a lot of the
Yeah,
time.
totally. I think when they become simple enough for me to be present with them, like it never helps me when they're too complicated for me to have a little bit of like jazz in it. You know what I mean? I need to have like some space to like improvise. And a lot of the way that like I did ceremonial magic when I was young was I would be doing a lot of different rituals and never having the space or time to like really memorize any of them. So I always had like a book or a piece of paper in my hand. I was always doing some fucking complicated bullshit. And I was like, none of this was conducive to presence for me. And there's other magicians, there's other types of ceremonial magic where they're doing the same thing in cyclical ways and they really get to get in there. And I think that that's fucking beautiful and amazing when you can really get down and present with anything like that. But I struggled to get there with a lot of pieces of ceremonial magic.
Nice, yeah.
But yeah, there's certain like rituals that are pretty complicated that I've gotten like attached to, which is fine. But
There's one other thing I'll say about the consult that we did together. Again, it's just like one of the things that really stuck for me. And I remember what it was that you told me. I don't even really remember what the like question or problem was that I was having, but it was something like I was worried. I had some anxiety around like, what if coming into relationship with these deities means I'm going to be asked to do a bunch of shit I don't want to do or I'm like not good at or something. And I remember you talking about how like, it's they're going to be working with the vessel that's here, and like why would they ask me to do something that like somebody else is just way more built for or interested in. And yeah, there was something about, I think that's why I came to you, is because I feel this like wisdom from you over the years that I've been following you on Twitter as well, that it sort of just doesn't like transcends magic or transcends astrology or whatever the genre. I can just feel a lot of truth and wisdom coming out, and I got all of those little kernels of that in our consult as well.
That's really nice. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that like no bullshit stuff is like what I needed so bad when I was like trying to get into spirituality, and like it was a toughie to find, I feel like. Yeah, I like that a lot.
What do you wish that you had getting into spirituality that you didn't have?
Um, Probably, yeah, I don't know how I can answer that in one. I got into it at a really challenging time in my life. So like when I look back at it, I'm like, I wish I had like more emotional stability. More than like any specific tool that I was missing. I think that I had to go through sort of a trial by fire because I was changing my brain and my understanding of reality and like all of my spiritual structures and like the underpinnings of how I think like God works and like earth works. And that was really destabilizing for me while I was in like a really bad relationship, and like that was super challenging, and then like the ground of my being was also being fucking disturbed, and it just led to a lot of like paranoid thoughts and like a lot of the pitfalls that I feel like I've seen people fall all the way off the deep end on some of them, but and I recognize them. I'm like, ooh, that's happened to me. But like I didn't quite go all the way into the deep pool of anyway. So yeah, I just like had all these and what you just said about being like, oh, I'm really worried someone's gonna ask me to do something that I'm not ready to do or not able to do. I feel like I had so much like that reminded me of like a different state that I have been in, where it's like so much like neurosis around like doing the right thing. And like once I realized there's all this like meaning happening all around me, and that there was like something akin to like purpose in life. I don't even want to use that word because it implies like a fixed trajectory. But like once I realized that like there was like a higher meaning to my existence in some capacity, I got really fucking stressed about it, like in some really profound way. It was just like, I was just like, I don't want to fuck this up. Like, cause I had all these like ideas about how it was going to work, where I was like, oh, well, if there's like, if fate is real and if like destiny is real, then like there's probably like a specific path I'm supposed to be going on. And like, what happens if I miss a step? And like, I found myself just getting really neurotic about like minor things and, just like these issues. It really acted as like kind of a magnifying glass for like psycho spiritual issues that I already just had. Once I was introduced to the concept of having maybe like some degree of power over my reality, I think that's like a really big shock to the system. And I was like, oh my God, if I have power, then like there's so much I can fuck up.
Yeah, totally. It's like maybe I just want to go back to the old way where it's like really insignificant and lacking
Right, because
agency.
before I was like a nihilist, which made me unhappy for like obvious reasons. But
So how has that changed for you throughout your path?
oh, that's such an interesting question, because it's like I still believe that I have like I honestly don't know how to answer this well, so I'm just gonna like pray that I do a good job and like try. um yeah, I have like I've had to like let go of like a lot of my like desires to draw conclusions about anything, and I found that really helpful because I think I was trying to piece together a new reality, and some of those things were just like revolutionized versions of Calvinism, right? Or it's like if things are happening to me, then it's because if good things are happening to me, it's because God has given me a gold star. If bad things are happening to me, it's because I'm not doing my path, right? And this is a lesson, right? Like that whole mentality where it was like I'm learning lessons. God is directly teaching me lessons like through the experiences that I'm having. That framework has caused me like so much psychological pain because it only works yeah, it doesn't, it kind of stops working when like really bad things start happening to you. You're like, wow, why did I bring this upon myself? Right. And there you can see the problem in the ideology.
Yeah, like what's my shadow stuff that's attracting this massive grief into my life?
Yeah, literally. It's like, why did this horrible event befall me? Like, how have I been vibrating on the frequency that like drew this in? And
Yeah.
like, I think it's so, yeah. So I'm now practicing holding like duality in my brain simultaneously in sort of a non-dualist way where I'm like, okay, I believe that like I am in communion with spirit and that God is like communicating to me through omens. And that's a thing that I can do. And that's a thing that all human brains can do if they decide they want to try. So if I believe that, then like how do I deal with the problem of evil, basically, which is something that like all spiritual philosophers have to deal with at some point. And the answer is just like I don't. So it was way harder when I was trying to like grab the problem of evil and like wrestle it into my meaning making machine, right? Like
Yeah.
I have now integrated this thing where I'm like garbage things happen and it doesn't make any sense. And like that was really important.
There was something
Yeah.
that you said on another podcast that I thought was like really beautifully worded. That was something simple like God is talking about everything all the time. And that really landed for me. It's like everything includes a lot of shittiness. So shitty stuff is just happening all the time.
Yeah. Shit is just happening all the time. Yeah, it's tough because it's like I believe that I have a personal connection with spirit, right? So it's like some of these things I feel like are being said to me directly, but it's like you just can't take responsibility for everything that happens to you. I think that like the amount of hubris that I sort of took on board initially, and I don't blame myself for that. That wasn't my fault. Like, it's a huge shock to your system to go from being functionally an atheist to being like, oh my fucking God, there's like so much meaning suffusing everything and magic works. That's crazy. Um, yeah, so I feel like that centered me really aggressively, like at the center of the universe, kind of in like an ego maniacal, but like still very like, oh my God, this is wild, like reverent way. Like, I don't think I was ever like, I am a God, you know what I mean? But like but that self-centering of being like I'm the main character and everything that's happening around me is happening as like a lesson for me, like plot development and all this, which some people, I think a lot of spiritual people believe this on some level.
Yeah.
And like I still do on some level, but the level to which I think that is true has been greatly reduced.
Interesting. How do you relate now to like missteps and missed opportunities and some of those things that would have caused you a lot of stress previously?
Oh, I think that so much of my work with Hecate has been like about this, because I think about the symbol of the crossroads and how a feature of the crossroads is that they are they're constantly crossing, right? So it's like I see every possible moment where you stop and make a choice as like a bifurcating series of optionality. So I guess by sort of understanding that there's just like a bajillion of these potential destinies, as it were, yeah, I feel like she's really honed in on me to sort of balance this out for me. It has been like any of these options are fine, actually.
Nice.
Like they're all fine on some kind of like cosmic scale. Like the destiny concept, I feel like is like so singular for some reason, because like that's how it looks from the end looking backwards, where you're like, oh, that's how I got here, look at my special destiny. But like when you're still in the middle of the process, it's actually like an infinite probability field still, and is only going to do that like beautiful meaning making looking backwards. And by this I do not mean that you're going to for sure get to that one point and look backwards. Like you're actually going to wind up in like one of 1,000 places and look back and be like, wow, that was a beautiful, crazy, serendipitous thing that just happened. Because there's like infinite abundance actually of those.
Nice.
I think that's really like what changes. I had this like major like scarcity mentality to like about my destiny and like leading a life of like beauty, basically. I was like, I can fuck this up and like God will take it away from me.
Yeah.
And over time in relationship and like healing my own like attachment dramas or whatever, like I feel like I've been able to like hear the like no on that. Like that's not what's happening here.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. That's really nice to hear you talk about it because I just relate to a lot of the stress of what you're describing, and I don't think it's as far in my past as it is in yours. So it's just nice to, yeah, it's
It's not
nice to
that
hear
far
you
in my
describe
past.
it.
I've had a lot of time to think about it, but it's not that far in the past.
Yeah. Yeah. It's gotten better for me, but it's definitely still there sometimes. I guess
I
it
think it
feels
really
for,
is.
go ahead.
I think it happens for everybody too, because it's like you have to deal with all of this new information from the background radiation culture of what the tools we've been given, right? Which is like Calvinism, basically, which
Mhm.
is just like a simple spiritual doctrine that says that all of the fates that befall you are happening due to God's personal feeling about you, basically.
Mhm.
Like that's what Calvinism is, and that's like the spiritual operating system that like a lot of evangelical America is operating on, and that's just like what we're getting inundated with all the time, whether we're Christian
Right.
or like anywhere near Christianity or not.
Right. And plus you're saying like bringing in all of our attachment stuff too.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Like I'll find myself saying things to spirits that I'm just like, well, that doesn't make any sense because you're like a god. Like, why would you feel that way about me? I'm just like, you don't even like me. And I'm just like, why do I think that?
Why don't we talk about your new consult type?
Oh, okay. So this one is called Exile's Insight, which is a really cool name, I think. And it is about a very specific like astrological situation. So I'll just list it if your people are not like astrology people exactly. It's like so an Aquarius sun, a Capricorn moon, um, a Scorpio moon, a Venus in Aries and Scorpio. I think I'm missing. Oh, and Virgo, and then Mars in Taurus, Libra, and Cancer, and then Saturn in. I'm skipping Mercury. Sorry, this is longer than I thought it was going to be. Mercury in Pisces or Sagittarius, Saturn in Cancer or Aries. Yeah. And then Jupiter in Gemini, Virgo, or Capricorn. Okay, we did it. So if
So
you have any of those, if you have any of those things, this consultation is like targeted specifically for these people. So this condition is called exile or fall. There's two different conditions, but I'm just going to refer to it all as exile because it's just like it's simpler for me. And they're basically what it means is it's like the planet is in a place that is traditionally TM, like from the traditional corpus, considered to be of ill fate, right? There's something about it that's like, this is hard. And a lot of my work about this is sort of using a little bit of a straw man understanding of the way that modern people understand this concept of like exile and fall as a dialectic to like explain my position. So I'm going to do a little bit of straw manning and explaining this. Just warning. Yeah, so I feel like it's very easy to be like, you have a situation of ill fate. Like you have an Aquarius sun, right? Your sun is bad at being a sun. Like that's kind of the attitude. Is it's like in Leo, they're good at being a sun. That's the sun sign. He fucking loves being there. This is like tropical vacation day, right? Like we're having a great time. Whereas like, and then I feel like we kind of describe, or we do kind of describe Aquarius sun as being like the sun wishes he was in the tropical vacation zone, but instead he has been relegated to the dark half of the year to January, right? Like he wants to be on summer break, right? But he's actually here in the frigid north. And that's very much how it's presented. And so I feel like when we get into astrology, we get a little deeper in knowing we know our sun sign, we know our moon sign. We're like, ooh, we start getting into condition and we see these like labels on our chart that say like -10 dignity points right next to your sun. And you're just like, why is that happening? Like, what does that mean? And there's a lot of like, we don't have a lot of modern astrology does a lot of positive thinking And traditional astrology does a lot of like fate is real and you have to contend with it. And I love that about traditional astrology. And I want to add a sort of like nuanced version of like fate is real and you have to contend with it. And also magic is real and you can fuck with things a little bit. And by like shifting the way you understand your own fate, you can kind of like decide to do things that are maybe like more favorable for you versus like less. Like I'll just give an example. So I'm an Aquarius sun, right? That's me. Um, I incarnated into a situation where my identity was very like not favorable in the situation I was in, right? So I'm like queer, I'm gender queer, and I'm like bisexual, and I incarnated into like a Christian family who are very nice. But like, but still, and yeah, and I grew up in a place that had very clear boundaries around like how you were allowed to like represent and really high achievement standards and like all this stuff. And here I was I wanted to be in like a punk band and like just doing whatever I want, and like I wanted to have a lot more autonomy than I was afforded. So I got in a lot of trouble. I was expelled from like multiple schools, and it was all this shit. Like my very identity was like working cross purposes with the circumstances into which I incarnated, right? So like that's fate by its, where there was nothing I could do about that. Zero augmentation available. From my perspective. But now that I'm older, I was like kind of an exile in this situation, right? I was like against a backdrop radiation that didn't work for me. And now that I have some more autonomy, I literally like have positioned myself in this world of people who are like only really fucking weird in this like specific way. Like I live in Portland, like I almost never have to talk to straight people. Like like the other day someone said something about like being like unworried about like being like too gay in a situation. I was actually experienced confusion about what they meant. And so like that kind of thing, you know what I mean? So it's like not like this like fundamental issue for me profoundly forever. It's like there's shit that can be done about it. Yeah, so it's just about helping people like reposition themselves like inside the narrative of being like, okay, but like what's the actual like, there's actually like secret fruit in here too. Like my like eye of the exile, right, from being in that situation my whole life has like led me to be like, I have like important critiques of the system TM now from being like exposed to that in that way, and like growing up with like ADHD, right? Like I have like takes about what the system is doing wrong because it was so untenable for me. And I think a lot of people have that experience when they have like challenging life circumstances. They're like we understand uniquely what the fuck is wrong with the system and what may be like harming everybody. Like I kind of use like a disability justice frame a little bit to think about it, where I'm like, this is a dumb example, but like I have sensory issues and like fluorescent lights kill me. And I'm like, fluorescent lights are untenable for me. We really should get rid of them all. Nobody else like cares that much, but I actually believe that low key on some level, every human being is being harmed by these horrible lights. Or like the 40-hour work week is another great example. Almost every person is being harmed by this. But some of us, like who are like deeper into disability, physically cannot manage it. And so it's like where we break down against the backdrop of like what's being forced on us by fate, by circumstance, by society. I don't mean immutable fate. Like obviously we didn't have to make credit scores and the 40-hour work week. Yeah. So I feel like the places where we're like our spirits are actually like or our physical circumstances are actually deeply incompatible with current reality, that's where we see opportunities for like change, revolution, or like just like meaningful critique that can help other people who are having like terrible experiences inside the system.
Ooh, so like maybe if past you had come to current you for one of these sessions with your Aquarius sun, what and yeah, I was gonna say the challenges that came with it, but again, maybe that is like could use a reframe. What do you think the session would look like, or you could just talk about it with, you know, another client?
Oh, especially with the sun, I feel like it would be, it's like the sun consults get really emotional. Like when I talk to Libras and Aquariuses, because yeah, I feel like I would just be like, the way that you are fundamentally is actually like not what's wrong here.
Yeah.
Because so much of the feedback that I got as like a teen was that there was something like broken about me in particular, and my inability to like hold up the standards of like the leonine success model as a son, um, was like the problem, as opposed to the idea that maybe we should just have like a more flexible model that can include all 12 signs of the zodiac, as it were. So yeah, I think just like the idea that like you're not the fucking problem, like your chart isn't the problem, like fate is not the problem, like the whole system is the issue, right? And like you can't shoulder the burden of that by yourself. Like, and meaningful critique of the outside is actually like a useful tool in this situation. You're not just like making excuses, right? And this is again where the disability justice model I feel like comes in. Especially like just like I'll use ADHD as an example because I have like high key debilitating levels of ADHD, and especially when I was in school, it was extremely challenging. Yeah, so I just feel like it's like that's not your fault actually. Like you deserve accommodation, right? From the system. Yeah, something like that.
Those sound like really therapeutic.
I hope so. I mean, I hope that that's the case for sure. Yeah, I always use this example too of being like the way Aquarius does self and the way that like Libra does self, which is like a primary signification of the sun, is very relational. It doesn't do this like it's just me out here on my hero's journey thing. It does like I am interconnected to everybody and like I see all these like possibilities, and like for me having an Aquarius identity is almost like watching a self from the outside, like high key, which is very Saturnian and very much like exiled, right? Like you're kind of like looking at it from the inside out. And then like Libra is always known for being like quote unquote wishy-washy, but it's like that's literally making a critique of the Libra sun from the perspective of Aries, where it's like Aries is decisive and doesn't care about what's happening around it in that way. It's like this is my fucking way. Like this is my Tao. I'm gonna fucking do it. You know what I mean? And I love that about Aries. It's so beautiful. It's like really like brave and like interesting. And then but like Libra is doing an equally cool, interesting thing, right? Where it's just like sitting in this kind of like relational spider's web and like actually taking this like interesting understanding of like what its fellows need because it's ruled by Venus, right? So yeah, it's taking a Venusian approach to identity, which is almost like friendship forward. So yeah, I don't know. But as a culture, right, like the very system, like the culture really values this one way of being a self. So I always joke kind of that like in a situation where if I were born into a culture that was like maybe like more like non-dualist, right? Like a Saturn ruled sun would be in great shape. Where it's like, I'm not actually sure this whole I thing has any like fundamental meaning. Like this seems like a little bit of a scam. That would not be in contrast with the background radiation of my culture as much in this like kind of imagined like non-dualist society, not necessarily any specific one, but and then like my son would be in a different shape. Like I wouldn't be an Aquarius in that system, right? Like I would have been born up whatever the fuck in this imaginary astrology would be like domiciled. So it's like about the way we relate to the background situation, not about some sort of like immutable feature of us.
Yeah, I love the way you describe bringing the disability justice frame into it. Like what I imagine from hearing you describe it is that maybe people who don't feel very seen in general come to you and get to feel incredibly seen and understood and validated.
Yeah, totally. And that's what really inspired me to like start talking about the exiled stuff, is like learning about disability justice and incorporating it into my astrology. It just seems like such a I hadn't really heard anybody do that before. I just got really super fixated on it. And now I'm excited to start like maybe teaching about it and talking about it on podcasts and stuff.
Cool. In either type of consultation, do you have like a favorite kind of client to work with or a favorite kind of problem to address with a client?
I don't know. I have a lot of favorites, but I feel like the one that's I think I love talking to people who like have their own thing going, or like in this really like fundamental, like, or not fun. They have their own thing going. They're like, I'm on a journey. I know what's up. And they like bump into me kind of in this way where it's like their own backpacker like on the trail, and they're like, oh hey, like nice fire, like do you have a different map than me? Like I have a map too, like let's like compare notes, like where are we going? And like they're kind of these very like collaborative sessions. And a lot of the time, and I mean even in my clients who are like, I don't know, just people who are like pretty like they're like on a journey, and they're not coming to me to be some kind of like guru figure or whatever. They're just like, oh hell yeah, another hiker, like let's chat and like split a Cliff Bar, you know what I mean?
Yeah, that sounds like you probably get access to some really cool maps that way too.
Totally. Like I often am listening to my clients talk and I'll be like, oh, that sentence was for me, and I'll like write it down to journal about it later.
Nice.
Yeah, like it's hard to figure it out like when you're like in a exchange model, like money wise, to be like, I'm not actually like, you know, because it's so much easier to position yourself as like a guru or like somebody who has like knowledge that you don't have access to, right? Because that's what's supposed to motivate you to give me the money, right? Where I'm like, I don't have something that you just like already have. I have to like come up with a way to tell you that I actually do have something that you don't have necessarily.
Right.
So it's been really challenging and interesting to like come up with a model of marketing myself that doesn't rely on like spiritual teacher tropes that I feel like are often really present, where it's just like, oh, I've been doing this longer than you and that's why you should come talk to me. Like and that's like true for a lot of people. Like it totally, like I have been doing this longer than a lot of folks, and like I'm happy and I love like mentoring and like even just being there as like a friend mentor, like, you know, it's awesome. But I want more of, and I want to be able to incorporate better into my marketing. Like I'm not just for people who have like not been wandering around the woods for as long as me. Like I would like to meet people. I had a consult recently with somebody who was like 35 years in on like a very dedicated spiritual path, and that conversation was fucking awesome. And we like both of us got a ton out of it, and I feel like I was really supposed to be there talking to this person, and it had nothing to do with the fact that I like knew more than him, quote unquote. Like he was definitely crushing it. And yeah, I don't know.
Can you say a little more about what you've learned in your own journey with like marketing and talking about your work, especially because what you do is so unusual and niche? And so to add a little bit of context, I'm a body worker. The podcast is nominally for quote unquote healers, which is not my favorite word, but just trying to like have a genre of people kind of in healing and helping professions. And I think a lot of people first getting into this type of work and trying to start their own business, I think they also tend to not be the kind of people who love to go around talking about themselves and like being the center of attention and like selling stuff. I don't know. That's at least my sense of myself and a lot of my kind of like bodywork cohort. So yeah, anything that you could say about what you've learned in your own marketing so far would be cool to hear.
Oh my gosh, I actually love thinking about this. I had been having a lot of fun with it over the last couple of years. Yeah, I think there's a lot of like really important stuff around identity work and like doing the magic of identity work. Yeah, I think that whatever tool you like already have is like the tool you should be using to figure out how to market yourself. I think that a lot of spiritual people especially tend to separate like the money stuff from the rest of our practice, because it's like it's like attached to the capitalist hydra, and we like would prefer not to like have to go into the dragon cave any more than we have to. Or like, I'm just trying to do my fucking massage, like don't make me do that. So I think we have to just be like, no, actually that's part of my spiritual path, like being paid for my work, like actually communicating to my audience in a way that lets them know, like nobody knows they're supposed to come talk to me unless I'm able to talk about myself. I can't do my work unless I'm like successfully brightly communicating in a way that like lets like you, for example, like see me on Twitter and like know that I'm a potential option to like come chat with. um
And is that what you
yes,
mean by identity work, or is that something else?
I think that's something else. It's like we have to like integrate the like bad capitalist part like into our own purposes, and then the identity stuff is like, I think it's like whatever tools you already have. Like I use a lot of tarot and astrology to think about my business. um and I'm like, if my I'll just ask my cards, right, to be like, what's my deal, like how does my audience need to see me like for my message to get across, and I'll just like flip a couple of cards, or like what's the most aligned brand identity that I could be like emitting right now, and I'll like flip some cards.
Hmm.
And then just try and like kind of like write about those and just be like, and describe myself that way, and just be like, I am the Queen of Cups because, and then just like write about my offerings, like because I can hold a container of water for other people to see the reflection of themselves in, right? Like whatever. And just like creating these little prompts. Yeah, and I worked a lot with a brand coach. Captolia online is my favorite resource for this. She's amazing and has taught me a lot of the things that I understand about branding. And she's like specifically for like witchy, occult, like alternative, like single biz people, which is really great. And one of the things that she taught me that I really liked was that when you're for everybody, you're like for nobody. So like I actually wrote this at the top of our pages, my page for notes for this conversation, which I'm just going to take as an omen. But I feel like there's this desire to be like, oh, well, I'm a massage therapist, so, and I want clients, so like I want to get as many clients as possible, so I'm not gonna like be like, I'm a massage therapist for witches, because that's gonna eliminate everybody who's not a witch, right? And like me being like, I'm an astrologer for magicians, right? Like obviously that alienates anybody who's alienated by the word magic, but that actually is good for me because I like only want to talk to people who fuck with occultism or some kind of like, yeah, I mean, here I go trying to hedge it. I'm like some kind of like alternative worldview or whatever. Like I'm doing it right now. But the reality is, it's like people have brains. You know what I mean? Like somebody can hear that and be like, oh, well, I'm not a magician. And if they're put all the way off by that word, I'm probably not necessarily like, I don't need to be marketing to you because it's like going to dilute my own message to have to do that. But a lot of people hear words like that and they're like, oh, I'm not a magician, but like, that sounds cool. Like, I'm still like intrigued by that. Like you, I'm an astrologer for magicians, and you're like not like, you don't identify as a magician or an astrologer, but you still like got the gist and came to talk to me.
Yeah, totally. I think this is really interesting, and it's a balance that I've been trying to find and cultivate. It's like I know body workers who are the most like magical, energetically operating, just incredible body workers who do this style that I'm really into, that's very niche. And then they also like have a part-time day job at a spa doing
Totally.
like really spa-y kind of massages, and that's cool.
Right.
And they kind of like that too. And it's a really different clientele and stuff. And so I do think about that in my own work all the time, is like, how much do I want to be like, this is the style that I feel born to do, versus like, yeah, I can also expand my repertoire a little bit and like get to know more types of clients and like find ways to meet their needs creatively.
Yeah. And I do feel like there's something too, like, but I just feel like you're not for everybody already. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
and there are going to be people who have different needs who still want to come talk to you.
Yeah.
Like if you're making your like siren song more specifically geared, like my whole like vision for my branding journey is to just have the most effective like siren call slash like lighthouse, not lighthouse, bad example because it's a place you're not supposed to go, but like little fucking like hermit lantern, right, that can let you like see me through the dark woods, right? And the more myself I look while doing that, the more soul aligned the people who are attracted to it are going to be, because I'm going to be like, what are the odds of seeing somebody who combines all that shit that has meaning to me? Like, wow, that's crazy. Like, obviously, you're the one for me. Like,
Cool. So
that's
have
the
you seen
response.
that, have you seen that trend in your clientele over the years?
Yeah, I got a person the other day who had the exact tattoo that I had like was about to submit a request form for. It was
Oh
like
my
all three
God.
pieces. It was like a certain type of animal, an object, and the placement were all the same.
Oh my
And I
God.
was like, this is fucked up, actually. And she lived in my town. It was really weird.
That's awesome.
And because of the tattoo, I was like, oh, I know what God told you to get this tattoo because it's the same one who told me to get the tattoo. Like, what's up? Like, let's chat.
Do you end up in your gods and guides sessions kind of like introducing people to deities that way?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
And honestly, that's one of the things that I think I'm there to do. The gods and guys are interesting because it's like I got told to do that container kind of, and I'm just like, sure, whatever. And like what it is has like changed. Not sure, whatever. I'm like, I love it. I'm super like excited about it. Um, and one of the things that I think it does do is I'm like, the gods know I'm available, right? Or like certain gods know I'm available to prompt somebody towards them. So people will show up and, pay their like reasonably like not cheap price of admission. And literally the entire conversation that we're supposed to be having, I think, is like, yeah, you're supposed to go talk to Hecate. That's correct. Like your inclination towards that is 100% accurate, and I can confirm it from like vision and voice. You know what I mean? Like, great, go do that. Here it
And
is
is
in your
that
chart.
people who like that deity is just like having a hard time getting through to them, or they just are hesitating and need a push, or what is it?
It's almost never that they're not successfully getting communicated with. It's usually like doubt, basically. It's like that thing where it's like, yeah, so I mean, like, just as like, if you're thinking about booking with me and you're like, I want to book this session because I think Hecate is calling me or I think Apollo is calling me, but like, especially if you think Hecate is calling you and that's why you want to book with me, she is calling you. You still book with me. Like, let's talk about something. It'll be awesome, I'm sure. But like, I'm just like, I can save people that specific. Like, I just know that that's what's happening there, because it's happened like 10, 15, 20 times at this point where it's just
Wow.
like, and it's really cool. And like she's the one I feel like that people need the most help toward. I don't
Huh.
know if it's because she's like scary or like particularly cool. I've also noticed that this happens like when someone's like, that's not the deity who's calling me. They're way too awesome. And I'm like, you're telling me that the god that you're like completely fucking obsessed with and have loved since childhood, you're like, surely not them. I'm like, it's that one. And I do this all the time too, where I'm like, obviously I'm not gonna like be a person who's like connected in some way to like Tiger's Eye, because Tiger's Eye is the coolest fucking rock. And I'm like, you think that because you're a Tiger's Eye person. Like, if you went and asked 10 people what the coolest rock was, none of them would fucking say Tiger's Eye, okay? Like,
This is
that's
like
your
a
identity. It's your unique spiritual nature that you're like picking up on.
you're picking up on that and then deciding that it's too good for you because it's so clearly the best
Because
one.
it's
That's
so
hilarious.
cool, right? And it's
Yeah.
like, I totally get this. It makes so much sense. Because it's like, yeah, it's like, I don't know. I'm trying to think of an example, but it's like, it's almost like you don't want to be like pick one that's like played out or something. You're like,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
was just talking to Talumot on his podcast about like favorite animals and how like when I was a kid, I was like, oh, it can't be like a lion or a tiger because that's like too cool. And it is kind of like the main character of the animals, you know what I mean? Like they
Yeah.
are actually in that case, I feel like they're pretty like popular animals amongst children.
But so you ended up developing a stronger relationship with hawks?
I don't even know if hawks are my favorite animal. I just love a hawk. I feel personally aligned with
Well,
the hawk mythosphere. They're the homies.
that feels like that's again like part of the thread under both of these types of consultations is like validating what people are already like drawn to and maybe have a lot of doubt about, or like what you're saying was just the backdrop that so many of us grow up in, are born into, live in, where this all sounds fucking crazy and nobody knows what you're talking about. And so that, all of the doubt is increased by that.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And I just feel I love talking to people. like that. Like I love talking to people who are like deep in on their path, but I also love talking to people who are like, I know that this is it. Like I'm fully aware that this shit is real, but like are in like something of an adjustment period. It's really rewarding to me to get to have these conversations that are like so like they're like right there for me because I'm like this is my like everyday I like live and breathe like this kind of thing and then someone's like oh I just don't have any friends to talk to about this like at fucking all and I'm having these thoughts and like I'm developing these ideas and I'm getting these intuitions and omens but it's like happening in this void basically where there's like zero confirmation outside of my own head so
Yeah,
it's really nice to be able to be like hello is I an external party who knows nothing about you here's some information
that's
and they're like oh
amazing.
thank god that's like what I thought already and I think that's such an important validating experience for like midterm magicians to be like oh like I actually do know what's going on like somebody who I think knows what's going on has told me that I did successfully figure out what's going on great and then like they go forth and the practice like deepens and gets richer because they gain like faith and trust in themselves.
Yeah, this feels like something that's probably pretty common among various like healers and people in helping professions is like that I think a lot of what we're doing in body work is just trying to make people feel seen, and there's a
Mm,
lot of different ways that you would do that in
mm.
body work and different styles that people want in order to feel seen, whether that's like super light touch and like slow and rhythmic or like just like fucking deep tissue elbow into the leg, that's going to
That's
make
such
some
a
people feel seen.
that's such a good thought because I think because it like involves touching the body, people are like, oh, you're like fixing it, but it's like part of the way in which you're fixing it is about like like actually like putting your eyes on it.
Yeah, or like they're fixing it and you're kind of touching stuff and helping, but
Yeah.
yeah. But I mean, obviously you bring tons of expertise to it too. But yeah, I hadn't
Right.
really thought before this conversation about how much of it is like telling people like or like yeah, really seeing people validating them along their paths and being like, you're not crazy. In fact, you're like really onto something here.
Yeah. And pain is such a good example for that. Like if you're doing body work, because it's like people are in pain and I feel like gaslight themselves about it because it's like the medical complex is gaslighting them about it. And then it's like there's all this like resistance to like letting the knot like release or whatever like because it's like if you're pushing against it and you're fake and it's like I'm real like and there's like two opposing forces
Yeah.
just being like no you're right it's like suddenly the tension is gone because there's not two things pushing against each other anymore.
Yeah, or like let's listen and see what the tension is trying to say. Maybe it's like got a message for you about your life, what
Oh,
you need.
well, it's all just divination.
Yeah, kind of. That when I said that, I was like, whoa, it's just more omens in the form of bodily tension.
It's really funny because I definitely do that in with myself like I'm always like the old knee pain that shows I need to like investigate my fear of death is back.
Wow. Is that a consistent one for you?
Sort of. Yeah, mortality and knee pain is like connected for me. Knees are ruled by Capricorn and like Pluto, who is like obviously the god of death in the underworld, has been transiting Capricorn for like so long and is like
Hmm.
I have my natal Saturn there. It's a whole thing.
Interesting.
When you bring astrology into the body omens too, it gets like really dimensional in that way.
Wow. Now I know the first like branch of astrology I need to get into.
Oh my god, medical astrology and like body astrology is so fucking cool. Judith Hill is like the goat of that right now who's still
Cool.
living. So that's somebody to look into. And then
Yeah,
Cameron
I'll check
Allen
them
is a
out.
modern person who does like a lot of cool stuff there.
Nice, thanks. This feels like a good opportunity to talk a little more about omens, which have been coming up throughout the conversation. Um,
Never stops.
you facilitated something called an omen walk
Yeah.
towards the end of last year. Yeah, why don't we talk a little bit about that? Because I ended up doing an omen walk, like a modified version, kind of in about a month ago for
Oh, you did? Tell me how that went.
it was awesome. So I think you did this in December and it was kind of like looking ahead at the year at 2023. And I missed it and came across that you had done that in maybe like late January, and it was kind of starting to go down the route of like, oh, that sounded really cool. Maybe I'll catch it next year. And then I was like, no, Jane, like fuck around, find out, like just adjust, make it happen. So I did it for the first 11 days of February, and like February 1st was like my omen for February, and then the next day was for March. So it's just kind of doing like the remainder of the year. So yeah, I was looking for an omen each day that would I think I was asking kind of like for omens about themes, challenges, directions to go in for that specific month. So yeah, so far, I don't know, I've had 2 of them so far that I've gotten to watch play out a little bit, and just like incredibly spot on.
Well, can you give an example? I feel like this is a great way to illustrate the thing.
Yeah.
You don't have to.
Not gonna talk about the March one, but the February one, I'll talk about a little bit about the March one, part of it. The February one was like, I took my dog somewhere. We drove home. I park in the parking lot, and like usually, I mean in the driveway, and usually when I let her out of the car, I like put her leash on and like take her through the back gate into the house. But I guess it was like just trusting her. I'm just gonna let her out of the car without the leash on, and before I knew it, she bolted across the street after a cat in
I
my
trusted
neighbor's,
you.
yeah, the neighbor's yard across the street. And I just like could not believe that had happened, and that it had happened so fast, and that she had just like run into the street like that. And the whole thing was just like really unusual and threw me off. And then I don't know, I got a sight of this cat that she had chased, and it was an all black cat. And I don't remember if there was something else that day that also added to the feeling of like, oh, this is the omen for today. So that was my February omen. And then looking into it, I mean, that's one of the ones that I think just can have a lot of potential different meanings. But they seem just very connected with like magic, witchcraft, and death were some of the ones that I looked up that felt relevant. And then sort of like all of February for me ended up being about a little less about my body work and a little more about going in the direction of death work, which has been an interest of mine since last summer, and that I've been kind of like tabling and trying to figure out what to do with.
That's such an interesting, because when you said like the dog just like bolted, and like you were like, I'm having trust in you and it's gonna be okay, and then she was just like, goodbye. That made me think about what we were talking about, where it's like sometimes garbage things happen and it's actually like nothing to do with you or your choices. And I feel like death is like the best example of that, where it's like you can't control that. I don't care how good you are like at stuff and how many gold stickers you think God is going to give you, like you're still for sure going to die.
Nice.
So that's like a great example of powerlessness through like no fault of our own. It's like still good to cultivate a relationship with life that includes trust, even though it's eventually going to kill you.
Yeah, nice. Let's see. I also just felt like my connection with magic feels kind of like up and down. Like there are months and periods where I feel really interested in it and drawn to it, and months where I don't, or periods where I don't. And so that also felt like an ongoing thing for me in February, was just feeling very connected to magic, connected to the universe in a very magical living way that was very palpable all month, being really interested in divination tools, just cultivating those relationships more.
I love that.
Yeah. It was interesting. Like I would say there were probably 2 of the 11 months that I did the Omen walk for that I didn't feel like I kind of missed it, or I didn't get one, or
happens to me every year.
Yeah.
And it's usually the months that I get seasonal depression.
Interesting.
It's just like a dead zone.
Interesting.
Which is accurate. That's like what happens to me in those months. I'm just like, well, time to die temporarily.
What have how have your omens from your omen walk at the end of last year played out for you so far this year?
I'll give my March one, which is a little bit embarrassing, but it's like I was walking around a park in London with my sibling and her husband, and there were these swans who are my like prototypical love animal. That's like what they are. And, and I don't know, they were just like swimming along, and I was like, oh, that's so cute. Like, I wonder if this is my omen. And then I was like, no, it's not your omen. Like, love is not for you. Like, I just had this like fucking, I had like just ended a relationship, and I was like still very sad about it. And I don't know. And I just like, I saw like a love omen, and then like my brain, my operating system, as it were, like didn't have the software to receive it. Where I was just like, surely not. Like, surely this is not the love omen. And then I was like, all right, calm down, Hawk. Like, why don't we just chill out? First of all, like maybe they are for you, and maybe this is your omen, and let's just ask. So I was like, okay, if I see like, because normally I do like a rule of three, where I'm like, if there's three of something, I'll count it as something, you know, because you have to have some kind of selection criteria, otherwise you go insane. So I was like, there were already two, which is what kind of tipped me off to it, and they're like an animal of Hera and of Apollo, and like I don't know, Hera's obviously the goddess that rules like marriage, or speaks a lot of marriage, and then there's a pair of them, so I'm like, well, that's fucking cute. And I was like, but if there's one more, I'll count it, right? And then like three more just like appeared instantly, and I was like, all right,
Wow.
we're writing it down, fine. Love in March. And I like met this little cutie who is like being really sweet to me and like likes me a ton. And it's the way in which I took the omen is like very similar to like how this is unfolding. They're just like, hi, I like you so much. And I'm just like, that can't be true. Surely not. Like, surely this isn't for me. Like, surely it's not for puppies. And
Wow, that's so interesting, just as like how that could apply generally to omen reception.
yeah, because it's like you miss it. And if the way you received it was I saw a thing that might have been love, and then I was sure it wasn't for me, if that's the operating system you're working on, you get to the point in March and the guy's like, I really like you, and you're like, that's not for me, right? And then the omen still works, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
It like leaves room for it to be like it's interactable.
Yeah.
Or interactive rather. Yeah. Cute. Anyway,
I love
so
that.
he's still
Something that
around.
I felt like you're saying the rule of three, because I think when I heard you talk about omen walks, what you're saying part of the purpose is just to kind of like cultivate that intuition or like self-knowledge of when you're actually seeing one.
Exactly,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, so something that I was noticing happening was that like I'd be driving or something, and I would just, because I didn't have a specific time of day that I was looking for them. I'm out with my dog a lot anyway, so I would kind of, if I remembered to do it when I was out for a walk, I would kind of like set that intention. But sometimes it would just be like I would be driving down the street or something, and all of a sudden I would remember like, oh, I'm supposed to be looking for an omen. And then I felt like that was often the moment where like then I would see it right then.
Interesting. That's so cool.
Yeah, just like a little omen nudge.
It reminds me of an alert going off on your phone.
Yeah.
Ping.
That's just my omen alarm.
Yeah, and the way that I instruct to do it is if you're new to omens to actually set an alarm, because it's it's hard to figure that out from scratch, to be like, well, what the fuck is an omen, right? Like, how am I supposed to tell this from every bird that flies across my path? And the answer is, it's like, well, it feels different. But that's not helpful to somebody who like has never had the feeling. Even if they have had the feeling, I feel like most people have gotten omened and like kind of know like that. Like a lot of people think of like have like one thing in their brain, but they're like, well, that was fucking weird. But yeah, so I recommend that people set a little timer for the same time every day, and then like ask in their opening prayer that's like sort of like, can I please get an omen at this time to like help me like get better at this.
Okay, so they would ask for it at that time, set an alarm for that time, and then like go for a walk or something.
Or whatever,
Yeah.
like it anything. So it's like I've gotten a lot of omens that are just literally like me staring at some object in my office when I used to have like a full-time job. It was like, yeah, stuff like that. But it's more exciting. I feel like it's more exciting if you're in an environment that introduces sufficient randomness. Like I appreciate not being in my house, because otherwise you get a lot of omens that are just like the wall or whatever. I got one pretty funny one though that was like my dad running up, and I went to visit their house, and it was like my dad running up and down the stairs trying to reset the router at midnight when the alarm went off. And then I was like, I wonder if there's gonna be some kind of like issue with communication. But it's like, no, my internet was just fucked up that whole month. Like we had to
Oh my
replace the router.
God.
It was like a really major internet connectivity issue the whole month. It was like a huge backdrop of my life.
Oh my God, that's hilarious.
I know, it's such a funny one. And I get a lot of them like that that are just sort of like almost like I feel like I'm getting like poked fun at a little bit, where it's like, you did not
Yeah.
ask a very specific question this year, my
Yeah.
friend.
Yeah.
You just said you wanted to know what was going to happen, so here's that.
Do you have advice for like what types of questions or explorations are good for like when to ask for omens versus other kinds of divinatory tools?
Oh, when to? Well, I feel like if I want to offer a suggestion for like how to do it better, which is that much like my branding advice, which is like the more specific the question, the better. It's like if I'm just like, I would like to know what is in the future, right? You're like, well, you're gonna have an internet outage. But like your question was really meaningful, I feel like, where you're like, I want to know sort of like what the spiritual like themes are gonna be. And that, I mean, it's still pretty open-ended, and that's actually what I did too this year. I was like, can I get almost a meditation object for the year or for the month? Like what am I supposed to be kind of like meditating on the nature of, and like focusing my inner work on? Because that's like what I would find helpful. So there's this like, yeah, anyway, more specific the better. And it's like, we don't want to ask vague questions to a system that's already very interpretable, because it's like, it's very like squishy and wavy to begin with. So it's like, you really need to be like, please show me like 3 raccoons if I'm supposed to move into this house, and then you have to say like, what do you mean by supposed to?
Yeah.
Because it's like, if moving into this house would be positively impacting me financially, right? Like give it the supposed to. Otherwise we're just like deferring to spirit to decide what we should do. And I've noticed that like my gods don't like it when I do that.
Yeah.
They're like, that's your job. I'm so sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. And it sounds like you're not only receiving omens when you're specifically asking for them. It just sounds like kind of an ongoing thing happening all the time. Is that right?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
It is pretty ongoing, which does happen like after a while. I'm just sort of like, oh yeah, this is constantly happening. Yeah, when to use, what was the original question though? Like when to use that over other tools?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I think tarot is faster because it's like I can just pull a card, you know? And like if I need a very direct and discrete answer, like if I'm just like, I would like to see the options between like option 1, option 2, like show me what this would look like, show me what that would look like. It can be challenging to solicit, you know, you got to walk around for like 2 days to get that going in the omen situation where you're like, please today show me the spiritual nature of option 1. And then it's like, you got to wait. Yeah. I've been getting into like direct channeling though, like, which I feel like is sort of an evolution of the omen stuff for me. But that obviously requires me to be in like a pretty like intensely present frame of mind. So it's like a lot more work than just like pulling a tarot card, although my tarot reads get better when I bother to do that work when I pull them. And
so are you channeling for other people or for yourself?
Mostly for myself, but I started doing it accidentally in the gods and guides sessions. I just realized that like that was happening. And that's why I started doing the gods and guides sessions too, is I was just having these regular natal chart readings where like some deity would like show up and be like, can you please tell this person that they're supposed to be like praying to me twice a day? Like, hello. And I'm just like, do you have a relationship with like Hera or whatever? And they're like, no, but I like really want to. And I'm just like, Okay, well, she has arrived to tell me this thing.
Yeah, I'm surprised to hear you say that you're just getting into it, because it sounds so much like what you've been doing as this type of consultation.
Yeah, when I say just, I mean like in the last like, it's like the back third of my practice.
Gotcha.
I was working with the same tools for a really long time, and I would have never called myself like a channeler or
And how is
whatever.
that an evolution of Omens?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, I'm using the same skill, I think, where it's like being receptive and like being open and like trusting my own interpretation and trusting the fact that maybe the gods actually, or spirits or whomstever, really do have something to say to me. Like all of those like underlying personal changes that like enable me to do the omen practice and enable me to be a good consulter. Um, all of that is like really necessary for me to believe that this shit is real. And if you don't believe that it's real, and it obviously gonna be a garbled ass message.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, I don't know, because I just never thought I was ever gonna be one of those people who was like, like writing down like paragraphs or something that they got from like spirit and then like publishing them, because there's a lot of people out there like that, and I just never thought it could be me, because I started off like very fucking spirit, like zero senses. Like a lot of people I feel like enter the chat with a lot of like visual like spirit sight, you know what I mean, and they can like fucking scry and like do all this shit. Like I have a lot of friends who can
What's
scry.
scry?
Like scrying, it's the word for the visual. It's basically just being clairvoyant. It's the visual version of, a lot of people use astral projection to mean this, where it's like you are using your visual sense to perceive a thing that is spiritual in nature.
Okay.
And you can do it like traditionally, like people will use bowls of water or a mirror. Like John Dee had like the famous like Elizabethan magician had a scrying mirror where you like look into it and like visual things actually like manifest in it. But
So you didn't feel like you started out, you kind of had to cultivate some of your, another way that I've heard it referred to as like high sense perception, or like sense stores. Yeah.
So I would never got any of that shit. Like people, and I like understand what people are saying when they're like, "Oh, I have what the fuck is that thing called? The brain blindness."
Brain blindness, face blindness.
No, it's like you can't visualize like those people.
Oh, yeah. It starts with an A. I can't remember what it's called either. Aphantasia?
Aphantasia. Yes. I like understand what those people are talking about. So that was like the first many years of my spiritual experience.
So I remember this being a very fun element of the conversation that we had in our consultation, was kind of like, my version of that is really somatic, and I didn't always have it either. It's kind of like once I started on this bodywork journey and spiritual journey, it really came online for me. And I felt like we could really like go back and forth reading things that way. But I'm curious, that really feels like my main one. Every once in a while I get auditory stuff, but I'm curious like kind of what your main ones are.
I really started there with what felt sense, like haptic stuff. But it's not really attested to as much in the occult corpus TM, because all those dudes are visual people, like Crowley, like and all those like except it's always done like through vision, right? People are like talking about what they see. And it's much harder to translate into language if you're like, yeah, I like my knee told me something about the like fucking the death mysteries or whatever. It's like, what? It takes a lot of like processing, I feel like, to get that into language. I'm lucky I have astrology as like kind of a third party thing where I'm like, yeah, okay, Capricorn, like I can sort of like get it over there.
Yeah. Is haptic, do you think that's the same thing as what I'm calling somatic? Is it just like stuff that you're feeling in your body that you're translating into messages and clues and intuitions?
I think so. I physically feel, especially when I'm doing like Reiki or something on somebody, like I'll like feel their shit. Yeah, in my own body. Like I almost get like a body map of their shit like overlaid onto me.
Yeah, same.
Cool. Yeah. And then when I work with spirits, it's like they'll pull my attention to something. Like I'll be like doing like a meditation, I'll like get some like left shoulder shit going on, and then I like breathe into that space and it like gives me information. And then the information, how does the information show up though, right? Because it's like I guess I get like fully formed ideas after that, basically. Is that
So
how that works
it's
for you?
kind of starts in the body, you feel into it, breathe into it, and then like sort of like words start to form out of it.
Or like I just get a conclusion, basically. It like is a thought at that point. Like
Interesting.
I am interpreting, I guess. What how do you get it from felt
Um,
sense
it
to
happens to me either like most commonly when I'm doing body work on somebody or even just having a conversation with somebody, usually more if I'm like wanting to tune in that way, like we're circling or we're just having a really intense conversation. Like I kind of don't want it to be on all the time, you know?
right?
And but so
It's a
the
lot.
main way that I feel it is like I can feel areas of them that are blocked,
Yeah.
or I can feel just like the emotional quality of it very strongly. Like, yeah, there's like some really heavy grief here. Let's get into that.
That happens to
Um,
me before sessions too. Like that totally does. Where I'll just be like suddenly like, oh my god, it is time to sob, and then I'll just be like, what? That's not mine.
wow, interesting. So it's like an omen that you're getting about the like emotional texture that's going to be present in the session.
I mean, yeah, I think it's just happening like a slightly like pre the timeline.
Yeah.
You know, it's like it's preceding the thing that is gonna make it obvious like what it is.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, but recently the shift for me has been I actually get like language now, I think.
Yeah.
Like it's like I'm skipping the body a little bit more. It's just like we get like full on like stuff that I could write down without having to interpret it. Like actual sentences like started coming through, which had a
Cool.
lot of like meaning to me that I didn't understand until research, right? So I was like, well, that's weird. I was not used to that. I was used to getting it in a very ephemeral form. And if you do body work, it's cool because it's like you get it in the body and then you translate it to their body. And it sort of doesn't have to do this pass through of like linguistic consciousness where it's like
Right.
you don't have to get it up there into the brain and get it out onto their body. It just goes straight from body to body.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's another one that I didn't mention is it's basically just calling me to like I think I should go work on their shoulder. I don't know why, but that's
That
what
happens to me so aggressively.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um yeah, sometimes I'll do a thing where I'll like sit beforehand or like the night before or something and just like invite that person's guides if they want to come show up and tell me in advance like you are going to want to work on this person's jaw or something like that. And that is yeah, pretty much always ends up being spot on. I don't know if it necessarily feels like I want to keep doing it. It's like I don't know that I'm getting a lot out of like having that knowledge in advance. Sometimes I'll just refresh a little bit on like specific techniques for that part of the body or something. But
Yeah, that's interesting because I feel like a lot of information like that needs to sit in the web of the present moment to really give a lot of meaning where it's like, oh, you need to work on the jaw. And it's like, if you found that out in session, you could be like, what's up with your jaw? And then there would be like the correct like web of context where you could actually like touch it and be like, hello, what is your nature?
I don't know if I know what you mean about the web.
Um, well, like I'm thinking about how a spider like sits inside of like a web that contains it and like lets it sit in a space. So it's like I'll use a bird omen for an example. Like say a seagull shows up, right? And it would mean something to me, like sitting inside the web of context of one moment, but would mean pretty much nothing to me at another time. Right. It's like their omens are really like context dependent in that way.
Right.
So it might be like I can see a reason to decide to be like, maybe I don't really need to do this in advance. Maybe maybe it would give me the most oomph to like let it sit in the web of the present when I need to use the information.
Yeah, totally.
But
Yeah,
if you
like
need to refresh, like the opportunity to refresh techniques and stuff, though, I feel like mine goes back and forth. It's like sometimes I get a piece of information like way in advance, and I'm like, oh, I need to like think about this or something. But
yeah, it's interesting how it sounds like yours has gone through some like a bit of a refinement process or something. Like how it used to be more ephemeral and then it started sort of coming through as these more fully formed ideas.
yeah, And you know what changed too as I started writing? I think that was like a major difference is before I was doing this like somatic stuff where like, or I was getting this somatic information and the only person I needed to communicate it to was like my best friends, where we can like have a big web of context between us and I can like make references to stuff that like we all get because like we've been talking for years. But when I decided I was going to start writing for an audience, it's like the shit has to be like defined
Yeah.
by me in language. I can't just be like, you know, the fucking like the Capricorn knee constellation of meaning that we all know about. And then I feel like maybe there's something to this, and I don't know if this is true, but maybe Spirit was kind of like, okay, like you're gonna start writing to an audience, and like some of this shit, like we definitely are having an investment in getting onto paper so other people can look at it. So like here's some information in language.
Cool. Yeah, I feel like you are really good at communicating your ideas. Like there's I kind of want to like read this whole thread of yours, even though it's pretty long. It's like it's this thread that you wrote almost 2 years ago that I think talks about a really important thing that probably happens to a lot of people getting onto a spiritual path or a magical path. And yeah, there's just something about the way that you worded it that I think it like really just like brings it home or brings it to life. So I'm gonna read it.
Okay.
Cool. Magic has more power if you gather up the courage to take it seriously. Making a constant stream of hedges and irreverent jokes about your own spiritual beliefs and traditions might be eroding your power. It's hella awkward to transition from being a normal person into being someone who thinks they can change reality with their will. I understand the impulse to squirm away from the magnitude of what's changing in you by taking it less seriously. It can be relaxing. But my practice shifted when I stopped hedging for social expediency or cracking an exhausting stream of irreverent jokes about my own spiritual path, class clowning it, satirizing here. It changed my relationship with myself, took out a recursive shunt for my energy, where I was looking in at myself from the perspective of others, judging it. I think this is the key to keep silent as a magical dictum. The gaze of the other erodes your ability to be single-pointed, naturally, because there is another thing involved. Magic demands single-pointedness. So drop the doubts and experiment with conviction. Experiment with taking yourself and your spirituality very seriously. Serious doesn't have to mean stuffy and covered in structure and ridiculous frills. Serious means eliminating the out-of-phase waveform of self-criticism. The inner eye wrapping back in on itself to judge what it must look like from the outside, the biggest waste of energy of my life, except in cases where I'm literally doing it for safety reasons. Fuck that. We're striving to kill that. Pretty awesome.
Wow.
I remember.
It's so weird.
Go ahead.
It's so weird hearing my own writing. I'm like, I said that?
Damn, that was good.
Well, because it's like all of this shit is in my brain all the time. I'm like, I'm constantly like working it on like 7 or 8 major concepts. And it's crazy to see in the past, like ways that I've articulated some of them. I'm like, oh, I did it on that one. That's cool. Like we did a quick little thing. Like that's neat.
Yeah, how does that one land for you hearing it now a couple years later?
I feel like I've really gotten somewhere with it because I was just thinking about this because I saw this post that I had made in my my friend who passed away's like in memoriam group, and it was from that year 2021, and I said in it, this was like 4 months before I made this post. I was posting to a group of normies basically where it's like his friends and family members, and was talking about like a sign that I had gotten about him on his birthday. And the way that I said it was like, it almost felt like a sign. And I'm like, that is not what you meant. And reading it back, it felt like I was listening to an alien talk. I was like, who the fuck said that? That could never be me. Like now I would either omit it and be like, this is not an audience who's going to be receptive to my truth, or I would just say it. I would never be like, ooh, almost maybe it's like an omen.
Yeah, so you would omit over hedging it that way.
Exactly, because it's like insulting to my ideology or something.
Yeah,
I don't know.
totally. Yeah.
Or it was done from like an insulting place, I feel like. Insulting is not the right word, but it's just like Yeah. It's like I was embarrassed to have the worldview that I had in front of these people. And I like wanted connection about it anyway. But I was communicating it in a way that downplayed it to the degree of prohibiting connection. Like,
Yeah.
like one person might have seen that and been like, you know, like 17 people in the group would have been like, that's bananas. Like, there's no such thing as omens. But one person might have seen it and been like, fuck yeah, I believe that's true. And then like maybe DM'd me, you know?
Yeah,
So it's
totally.
like by diluting my meaning, like I made it for nobody. It was for nobody. Like again with the like when you're for everybody, you're for nobody vibe.
Right, right, right. I feel like I really relate to this and I'm still making my way with it. And part of it is like what you're saying when you're talking to a wider audience and you can't just like talk about what was it like the knee Capricorn constellation thing. You know, you have to like kind of have words to back up the things that you're saying that other people don't understand. It's almost like math that I'm doing all the time where it's like, oh, that would be really hard to explain. I don't know if I've even like put words to that yet. Like I'm just gonna way play it down or like not bother.
It's so exhausting. I mean, it's really exhausting to try and be communicating about something that you're not, that you don't feel safe being heard on. Like I think that's like part of what it is for me, the energy shunt that I'm referring to there. Because you're
Do
doing
you
all this like it's like hypervigilance,
yeah.
and you're devoting all this energy to the hypervigilance that could be being devoted towards like hewing language from stone, which is like what's required of us to like get all these crazy ephemeral concepts out there into the world, is to like do a bunch of fucking like work.
Yeah.
It's like I need
Yeah.
that energy. I'm using it.
And do you feel like now you're just more in spaces where you feel safer in that way, or you just like own it with the normies more,
I think
or
I
you
am comfortable just like with the normies not knowing what the fuck I'm talking about and then just not talking to them about it.
yeah.
Like something, and I don't mean that in a way that, like I mean that in a way that still like that like values their perspective like extremely, where I'm like, I'm trying to have a conversation with you. I'm trying to get talk to these people because they are friends with Edward, my friend, and
Yeah.
that's why I want to have this moment of connection with you. It's not about me trying to tell you what I think about omens, right? So like if I
Right.
wrote that now, I wouldn't avoid saying it. I would just say this really reminded me of him, and I'd
Yeah.
love to talk with you guys about it if you want. I wouldn't have tried to go for connection on a thing that's like not related to where I was actually seeking connection.
Oh, nice. I love that distinction.
Because it's like there's something to be had between us, like even if you're not like on my specific shtick, you know?
Yeah,
And that's
totally.
been being really heavily emphasized to me like by my spirits like lately, I think, where it's like not just magical people who have like valuable shit to like to contribute to your experience.
Hmm. Yeah, I feel like some of the like wisest people I know like don't consider themselves spiritual or like have not read any spiritual books or anything, you know?
Yeah, seriously. And people who are clearly having like lives that are in like profound alignment with their like soul,
Right,
with
right.
like zero framework to conceive of a sentence like that. They're like, well, like that would mean nothing to them. But they're still like crushing it.
Yeah, I know. I had this moment recently where I was like, maybe I need to get the fuck out of spiritual spaces and just go hang out with like artists and musicians who just seem to have figured this out naturally when they were very young.
Yeah, potentially.
Um, is there anything, as we start to wrap up, is there anything that we've talked about so far that you want to go back to or like go in deeper with?
Literally the word crystals just came to my mind and I was like, we didn't talk about crystals at all, so I have no thoughts. And I'm not like a crystals
Interesting.
person per se, but
We talked about, was it Tiger's Eye?
yeah, we did talk about tiger's eye, that's right.
Anything else you want to say about Tiger's Eye?
It's fucking sick.
Um,
Everybody should buy themselves a piece of tiger's eye. That's the takeaway here.
cool. I want to ask, like, we've touched on what you do in your consultations and some broader things about just being in helping professions, doing one-to-one work with people. Is there anything else that you would say that you've learned about, yeah, like overarching themes about supporting people, holding space for people, how to show up for people that come to you?
I think like not trying to solve their problem has been like really helpful for me. I see myself as a problem solver, and I often like frame my consultations as being like, what is the problem, TM? And then we're gonna like troubleshoot it together. But like troubleshooting is not exactly it. It's more like we're just gonna like I loved what you were saying about it's more like we're just gonna like sit with it and let it exist and be like perceived by us in a more complex, like transcendental manner. We're just gonna like let it exist and like unfold between the scaffolding between us and yeah, expand our perspective on it. So I feel like that I like losing the pressure that I was putting on myself or am currently putting on myself, gradually losing the pressure to generate solutions for folks and like giving the agency back to my people, my clients, to be doing that for themselves. Because like I know that they're doing it. Like I don't need to fix it. Like y'all are fucking on a quest.
And what is that like, kind of sitting with it together like? Is that asking good questions about it?
I just feel like there's this magic that happens when you like engage with something with your full attention. And yeah, when like synchronicity has brought two people together to have a conversation. And what I really think I do well in my work is I like pray a lot, both inside my head and in like more ritualized manners to like make my space a place for like sort of this sort of like transcendental meaning that like calls in like an inspirited form of like the day-to-day reality. So I think just giving it a place to sit that's like that, that's more like a view from above. Like I always think about like the Hawkeye view. And that's like what the natal chart provides too, is like a look at your whole life, kind of like in this very like view from above way. Yeah. I don't know. It lets it just sit there and kind of like unfold like a flower or something. And you get to see like the whole thing and be like, oh, parts of this are like there's like a beauty and joy in like processing through this that's not just like painful and like I wish it would stop. It's more like, oh, like what's the like significance of this? Like how are we moving through it?
I love that.
Yeah.
That feels like a really good note to end on.
Great.
I will link your stuff, but where can people find you?
I'm Hawk Astrology. That's my name, Hawk, and then the back half of the word astrology. So Hawk, Strology. I'm on Instagram and Twitter, and I have a Patreon where some of my writing is free. So that's just patreon.com/hawkstrology. And if you go to any one of those, any one of my Insta or Twitter, all my shit will be linked there. And
awesome.
Yeah, I think my books are open for consultations. I'm not taking very many right now because I'm doing some writing and other stuff. But yeah, still have a couple of slots for folks, I think, for the time being.
Cool. Thanks so much for being here, Hawk. It was really, really cool to chat with you. And I just super appreciate you being out there doing your thing in public.
Thank you for paying enough attention to my thing to ask such nice and insightful questions about it.
Oh, you're so welcome.